After selling my house, I sat down with my children to divide the money from the sale. $280,000 on the table. My whole life summarized in that envelope. When I suggested keeping half for my old age, my son Mark snatched the envelope from my hands and shouted, "No, I promised my wife I'd buy her a condo a long time ago. You have Social Security, you'll manage." I stayed silent, completely silent, but I held on to those words. Every single one. And when he and his wife Esther returned from the real estate office days later, ready to sign the papers for their luxury condo, they were speechless when they saw what I had done. Because it turns out that a humiliated mother can be many things, but a fool isn't one of them. My name is Lilia. I'm 67 years old, and this is the story of how my own son tried to steal everything I had left, and how I taught him that there are things money can't buy, like the dignity of a woman who fought her whole life. Let me tell you from the beginning. I was born in a small town where women didn't dream of being nurses. They dreamed of getting married and having kids. But I was always different. I studied at night, worked during the day, and graduated as a nurse at 23 years old. I was the first in my family to get a college degree. I met my husband, Robert, when I was 25. He was a good, hardworking, honest man. We got married and built our life brick by brick. Mark was born when I was 26, and Rachel 3 years later. We were a happy family, modest but happy. We lived in a rented apartment, but we dreamed of owning our own home. Life was smiling on us, until it wasn't. When Mark was 19 years old and Rachel was 16, Robert had a massive heart attack at work. He didn't make it to the hospital. He was 47 years old. I was widowed at 45, with 2 children who still depended on me and a rented apartment I could barely afford. I remember that night like it was yesterday, sitting in the kitchen, with the funeral bills on the table, looking at the nearly empty bank account and thinking that everything was over. But it wasn't. Because I had learned since I was a child that women like me don't have the luxury of giving up. The day after the funeral, I asked for double shifts at the hospital. I worked mornings, afternoons, and some nights. I slept 4 hours, if I was lucky. Rachel learned to cook and take care of the house. Mark also worked part-time while he was studying engineering, or so he said. For 5 years, I lived on autopilot. Work, pay bills, sleep little, repeat. I sold the few pieces of jewelry I had, including my wedding ring. That was the hardest day, but I needed the money for the kids' college. I ate once a day so they could eat 3 times. I wore the same patched-up uniform until it fell apart. And then, when I was 50 years old, a distant aunt passed away and left me a small inheritance. $30,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for the down payment on a modest house. I cried when the lawyer gave me the news. Because finally, after so much sacrifice, I would have something of my own. A place to call home. I bought a small house on the outskirts of town, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and a yard the size of a dining room table. But it was mine, completely mine. I spent the next 17 years paying that mortgage religiously. Not a single late payment. I worked until I was 65, until my body begged me to stop, but I did it. I paid off the last installment 2 years before I retired. That house saw my children grow up. It saw Mark graduate as an engineer and get a good job. It saw Rachel get her accounting degree and open her own office. That house saw me grow old alone, but proud, because I had kept my promise. My children were professionals, they had futures, they had more than I ever had. Mark married Esther 5 years ago, a 38-year-old woman, educated, always well-dressed, with a perfect smile that never quite reached her eyes. From day one, she treated me with that cold politeness that people use when they consider you inferior. Mother-in-law, she'd call me, with that sweet little tone that sounded like condescension. But I wanted to believe she was good for my son. Rachel, my youngest, never married. She lived alone in an apartment near her office, visited every Sunday, and was the only one who really asked how I was. Not how my health was or if I needed anything. She asked how my heart was, if I was happy, if I was sleeping well. Rachel truly knew me. Mark had changed since he married Esther. His visits became sporadic. When he came, he was always in a hurry, and he always ended up talking about money, about how much it cost to maintain their lifestyle, about how expensive everything was, about how Esther deserved better things. The truth I refused to see was simple and painful. My son had become greedy. It all started about a year ago when Esther began visiting my house more often. She'd arrive with little cakes, with coffee, with that rehearsed smile. She would sit in my living room and look around as if she were evaluating every inch. "Such a big house for just one person, mother-in-law?" she'd say. "Don't you get lonely here?" At first, I thought it was genuine concern. How naive I was. Rachel warned me. "Mom, that woman is measuring your house like it's already hers," she told me one Sunday. But I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to believe my daughter-in-law could be so calculating. Then Mark started with the hints. "Mom, at your age, what do you need so much space for? Mom, this house is worth a lot of money now. The neighborhood has been gentrified. Mom, you could sell and live in a more comfortable apartment, no stairs, no yard to take care of." Every visit was the same song, the same pressure disguised as concern. And I, like a fool, started to consider it. Esther was more direct one day. She arrived alone, without Mark, with that same smile. "Mother-in-law, I have to confess something," she said, taking my hand with those perfectly painted coral-colored nails. "I'm pregnant." My heart leaped. I was going to be a grandmother? But we don't have anywhere proper to live. Mark is devastated. Because he promised me he would buy me a house before we had children. Her eyes filled with tears. Perfect tears that didn't ruin her makeup. There it was. The bait. The perfectly set trap. And I almost fell for it. I almost told her I would sell the house and help them. Almost. But something in my gut stopped me. A little voice told me, "Lilia, don't be a fool, this smells fishy." So I just nodded and told her I would think about it. I called Rachel the next day. I told her everything. There was a long silence. Then I heard a sigh. "Mom, that woman isn't pregnant. She's manipulating you. I saw her 3 days ago drinking wine at a restaurant. I felt the floor move beneath my feet." Esther had lied about a pregnancy? But I didn't say anything. I didn't confront anyone. I waited. And I kept waiting as the pressure mounted. Mark called every 2 days. "Have you thought about the house, Mom?" Esther sent texts. I even received brochures for senior living homes in the mail. Brochures I hadn't asked for. A month later, I made the decision. I would sell the house. But not for the reasons they thought. I would sell it because I needed to know how far my son would go. I needed to see his true face. I hired a real estate agent. I put the house up for sale. And I waited. The house sold in 3 weeks. $280,000. The day the sale was finalized, I called my 2 children and asked them to come to the house that afternoon. We needed to talk about the money. Rachel arrived first, worried. "Mom, are you sure about this?" I squeezed her hand and nodded. "I need to know the truth, honey." Mark and Esther arrived together, 40 minutes late. Esther was wearing an elegant green dress. Mark wore that smile that used to melt my heart when he was a boy. But now, I only saw calculation behind it. We sat at the dining room table. The same table where we had eaten dinner thousands of times. I put the envelope with the check in the center. Everyone stared at it. The silence was thick. I took a deep breath and said, "This money represents every double shift I worked, every meal I skipped, every dream I postponed. Now I want to divide it fairly." I paused. "I propose I keep $140,000 for my old age, for medical emergencies, to live with dignity. And I'll divide the other $140,000 between you two. $70,000 for each of you." What happened next changed everything. Mark shot up from his chair so abruptly it nearly fell over. His face turned red, the veins in his neck standing out like tense ropes. "$140,000 for you?" He practically spat the words. "What do you need so much money for at your age, Mom?" Esther placed her hand on Mark's arm, but it wasn't a calming gesture. It was one of support, of complicity. Rachel looked at me with wide eyes, as if telling me without words, "I warned you." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Mark, I am 67 years old. That house was my only asset. I need that money to pay rent, for medicine, to live. I don't know how many years I have left, but I want to live them with dignity. My voice broke a little at the end, but I continued. $70,000 is more than generous for each of you. It's money I never had at your age. Esther leaned forward, with that fake expression of concern I now knew so well. Mother-in-law, but you have Social Security. You have a steady income every month. We have huge expenses. Our apartment rent, Mark's car payments, my fertility treatments. There it was again. The pregnancy lie transformed into fertility treatments. This woman was a manipulative artist. Mom, Mark interrupted, and there was something in his tone I had never heard before. Something cold, something calculated. You know, I promised Esther I'd buy her a condo. I promised her when we got married. She quit her job to be with me, to take care of me, to be my wife. I owe her that. He paused and looked me straight in the eyes. We found the perfect condo. $150,000. With your half and a little more. We could buy it. The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel opened her mouth to say something, but I stopped her with a gesture. I needed to hear this. I needed Mark to say out loud what he really wanted. You're asking me for my entire share of the money, I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'm not asking you for anything, Mom. I'm telling you the reality. His voice was hard now, with no pretense of kindness. You get $800 from Social Security every month. That's more than enough for one person. We don't have anything secure. My job could end tomorrow. We need that security. We need that condo. He stared at the envelope on the table with an intensity that gave me chills. Besides, you paid for that house with the inheritance money from Aunt Martha. It wasn't just your effort, it was luck. I felt as if I had been slapped. Rachel shot to her feet. How dare you? She yelled at her brother. Mom worked 17 years paying off that mortgage. 17 years without missing a single payment. And you call it luck? Where were you when she was working double shifts? Where were you when she skipped meals so we could eat? Mark turned to his sister with contempt. You were always her favorite, Rachel. Always defending her. But I know the truth. Mom has enough money to live. I don't. I have a wife to support, a future to build. I'm not going to apologize for wanting more out of life. I'm not asking you to apologize for wanting more, I said finally, and my voice sounded calmer than I felt. I'm asking you to understand that I also deserve security, that I also worked my whole life, that this money is mine by right. Esther chimed in with that soft, venomous voice. No one is saying you don't deserve anything, mother-in-law. Just that, well, you've already lived your life. You've raised your children. You had your marriage. You worked. Now it's our turn. It's Mark's turn to have what you had, a home of his own, a stable family. Don't you want that for your son? The manipulation was so obvious it almost hurt physically. But what hurt most was seeing Mark nod along with every word his wife said, as if she were speaking universal truths instead of selfish lies. Of course I want Mark to be happy, I replied slowly, but not at the cost of my own survival. Survival? Mark let out a bitter laugh. So dramatic. Mom, you're not on the street. You're not starving. We're just asking you to be reasonable, to think about your family, your son. Or does Rachel matter more to you than I do? There it was, the attempt to pit me against my daughter, the divide and conquer tactic. But I knew that game. I had seen it before in manipulative patients at the hospital, in relatives fighting over inheritances, in people who used love as a weapon. This has nothing to do with preferences, I said firmly. It has to do with justice, with fairness, with respect. I placed my hands on the envelope, as if protecting it. The answer is no, Mark. I am not giving you my share of the money. $70,000 is what you will receive, and you should be grateful for that. What happened next still keeps me up at night when I remember it. Mark lunged across the table with a speed I didn't expect from my son. He snatched the envelope from under my hands with such force that my fingers scraped against the wood. Rachel screamed. I sat paralyzed, staring at my empty hands on the table. No, Mark shouted, holding the envelope against his chest as if it were a treasure he had just conquered. I promised my wife I'd buy her a condo a long time ago. I promised her, Mom. Don't you understand that? A promise is a promise. His face was distorted by rage, by frustration, by something I didn't recognize in my son. You have Social Security? You'll manage. You always managed. Esther stood up beside him, and on her face there was no surprise, no shock at her husband's violent action. There was only satisfaction, as if this was exactly what she had planned. Mark is right, mother-in-law. You're strong. You've always been. We need this money more than you do. It's that simple. Rachel tried to grab the envelope from Mark, but he shoved her. My daughter stumbled backward, hitting the wall. That snapped me out of my paralysis. I stood up with a speed I didn't know I still had. Mark, that is theft. That money is mine. It's ours, he corrected, stuffing the envelope inside his jacket. It's the family's. And I'm part of this family, even if you prefer Rachel. His voice grew lower, more dangerous. We're going to the real estate office on Monday. We're going to buy that condo. And when we do, when we finally have something of our own, maybe you'll understand that I did the right thing, that this was necessary. You will return that money right now. My voice sounded like ice. Or I will call the police. Mark let out a laugh. A cruel laugh I didn't recognize. And tell them what, Mom? That your son took the money from your house sale? The money you were supposedly going to split with us? They'll see a confused old woman trying to accuse her own son. They'll see a family matter, not a crime. He stepped closer to me, so close I could see the stress lines around his eyes. Besides, do you really want to destroy your own son? Do you want me to have a criminal record? Do you want to ruin my life? Esther took his arm. Let's go, honey. We've done what we came to do. She looked at Rachel with contempt. Enjoy taking care of Mommy now that she's left with nothing. Seems like that's what you always wanted anyway. And then she looked at me. Don't worry, mother-in-law. When we have our condo, you can come visit. If you behave. They walked out the door as if it were nothing, as if they hadn't just destroyed their own mother, as if they hadn't just stolen everything I had left. I heard Mark's car start and drive away. The sound faded into the distance, taking with it $280,000 and any illusion I had left about who my son truly was. I stood there, in the middle of my empty living room, staring at the closed door. Rachel ran to me and hugged me, crying, Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Let's call the police. Let's call them right now. But I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I could only feel the weight of the envelope that was no longer in my hands. The weight of betrayal. The weight of having raised a son who was capable of this. No, I whispered finally. We're not going to call the police. Not yet. Rachel looked at me, confused, tears streaming down her cheeks. What do you mean, not yet? Mom, he robbed you. He stole everything. I looked her in the eyes, and something inside me that had been dormant for years woke up. Something cold, something calculating. Something I had learned from years of working in a hospital, seeing the worst of human nature. I mean, your brother made a mistake. A very big mistake. My voice was calm now, completely calm. He thought that because I'm old, I'm stupid. He thought that because I love him, I'm weak. He was wrong. What are you going to do? Rachel asked, drying her tears. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just realized she had been too good for too long. I'm going to teach your brother a lesson I should have taught him years ago. I'm going to show him that his mother didn't make it to 67 by being naive. I sat down on the sofa, with Rachel beside me. But first, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to call someone. Who? She asked. Richard, I said. The family lawyer. The one who handled your father's estate. I looked at my phone, calculating. And after we talk to him, we're going to make a few more calls, because your brother thinks he's going to buy a condo on Monday. But what he doesn't know is that that condo will never be his. Rachel looked at me with a mix of worry and admiration. Mom, what are you planning? Justice, honey? I replied simply. I'm planning justice. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the sofa, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands without me taking a single sip. Rachel stayed with me, insisting I shouldn't be alone. But I needed the silence. I needed to think clearly, without the noise of emotion clouding my judgment. because what I was about to do required precision. It required coldness. It required being smarter than my own son. At 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, I called Richard. He answered with a sleepy voice, clearly woken up by my call. "Lilia, are you okay? Did something happen?" The concern in his voice reminded me why I had trusted this man for so many years. He had been Robert's friend. He had handled his will. He had been there when I needed him most. "Richard, I need your help. I need you to come to my house today. It's urgent." My voice didn't tremble. I wasn't crying. It was pure determination. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Richard knew me well enough to know that if I said something was urgent, it was. "Give me an hour," he replied, asking no further questions. "I'll bring coffee." When he arrived, Rachel and I already had everything prepared on the table. Documents from the house sale, bank statements, and most importantly, the video Rachel had recorded with her phone. I hadn't known it at the time, but my smart daughter had started recording when she saw the situation getting tense. It captured everything. Mark's outburst, his exact words. The moment he snatched the envelope from my hands, his confession that he would use the money to buy the condo, everything. Richard watched the video 3 times. Each time his expression grew more serious, more professional. When he finished, he put the phone on the table and looked at me directly. "This is robbery, Lilia. Theft with force. You can press criminal charges and he could go to prison." He paused. "Is that what you want?" I thought about Mark, about the boy he had been, about the nights I stayed up with him when he had a fever, about his graduation, when he hugged me and told me it was all thanks to me, about the person I thought he was. And then I thought about the man who snatched the money from my hands. His cold eyes, his contempt, his selfishness. "I don't want to destroy him," I said slowly. "I want to stop him. I want to get my money back. And I want him to learn that there are consequences for his actions." I looked at Richard. "Can we do that without sending him to prison?" Richard nodded, already thinking like the brilliant lawyer he was. "We can, but we need to act fast. You said he plans to go to the real estate office on Monday, right?" I nodded. "Good. Then we have the weekend to get everything ready." He took his laptop out of his briefcase. "First, we're going to file a police report for theft. Not necessarily to prosecute criminally, but to create an official record. That will block any large bank transactions Mark tries to make with that money." "You can do that?" Rachel asked, leaning forward. "Yes. With this video as evidence and Lilia's testimony, I can get an emergency asset protection order by early Monday. The on-call judge will approve it, especially since it involves elder abuse by a family member." Richard started typing. "But there's more we can do. Lilia, the check from the sale is in your name." "Yes," I confirmed. "In my name only." "Perfect. Then Mark can't deposit it without your signature or without forging it, which would be another crime. But if he has the physical check, he might try to forge your signature." Richard looked at me. "Do you trust that he would?" I thought about the man I had seen yesterday. His desperation. His conviction that he was entitled to that money. "Yes," I said finally. "I think he would try. Then I'll call the bank right now. I'll inform them that the check was stolen and that any attempt to deposit it must be reported immediately and blocked." Richard was already dialing. "I'm also going to ask them to temporarily freeze your account for security until we recover the check." The next few hours were a whirlwind of phone calls, documents, and planning. Richard worked like a machine, contacting the bank, preparing legal documents, speaking with the on-call judge. Rachel called the real estate office, where Mark planned to buy the condo, pretending to be a buyer interested in the same property. She confirmed that there was indeed an appointment scheduled for Monday at 10 o'clock in the morning under the names of Mark and Esther. "Perfect," Richard said when Rachel gave him the information. "Then this is what we're going to do." He looked at both of us with an expression that mixed professionalism with something resembling satisfaction. "Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning, we go to the police station with the video and the formal complaint. At 9 o'clock, we'll have the asset protection order. At 9:30, we'll be at the real estate office, waiting." "Waiting for what?" I asked, though I was starting to understand the plan. "Waiting for Mark to try to buy that condo with stolen money." waiting for him to realize that his mother is not the helpless old woman he thinks she is. Richard smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. When he arrives and finds out he can't make the transaction, when the real estate agent tells him there's a legal problem with the funds, that's when we'll be there. With the police, if necessary. And then your son will have a decision to make. What decision? Rachel asked. Return the money immediately and apologize, avoiding criminal charges. Or face the full legal consequences, including possible prison time. Richard closed his laptop. The choice will be his, but at least he'll know he can't get away with it. I sat in silence, processing everything. It was a good plan. A plan that would protect my money and put Mark in his place without completely destroying him. But there was something else I needed to know. Richard, if he does this, if he returns the money to avoid prison, what happens then? What happens to our relationship? Richard looked at me with compassion. That, Lilia, only you can decide. I can protect your assets and your legal rights, but I can't repair what's broken between a mother and son. That's up to you too. I nodded slowly. I knew he was right. I knew that even if I got the money back, something had been lost forever. Trust, respect, the illusion that my son loved me more than he loved money. Do it, I said finally. Prepare everything. We're going to teach Mark this lesson. The rest of the weekend passed in a strange haze. Richard worked non-stop, preparing documents. Rachel stayed with me, cooking meals that neither of us really ate. I sat in my empty living room, the same room where Mark had robbed me, and thought about everything I had lost and everything I was about to get back. On Sunday night, Rachel asked if I was sure I wanted to go through with this. We can still stop it, Mom. We can still just call him and ask him to return the money. Maybe if you talk to him calmly. Her voice trailed off when she saw me shake my head. I already tried talking calmly, honey. I tried reasoning. I tried appealing to his love, his conscience, his sense of justice, and he responded by snatching the money from my hands and shoving you against the wall. My voice was firm. No. Tomorrow he will learn that actions have consequences. He will learn that his mother deserves respect. And he will learn that he can't just take what isn't his. I didn't sleep that night either. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, mentally preparing for what was to come. I thought about all the times I had been too soft on Mark. All the times I had excused his selfishness as ambition. All the times I had ignored the warning signs because I didn't want to see the truth. Those days were over. At 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday, I dressed with care. I chose simple but dignified clothes. I did my hair. I put on a little makeup. I wanted to look like what I was. A 67-year-old woman who had worked her whole life and would not allow anyone, not even her own son, to strip her of her dignity. Richard arrived at 7:30 on the dot. He carried a briefcase full of documents and an expression that left no room for doubt. He was ready for a legal war if necessary. Rachel was already with me. She had spent the night on the sofa, insisting she wouldn't leave me alone. The three of us drank coffee in silence, each lost in our own thoughts about what was about to happen. At 8 o'clock sharp, we were at the police station. The officer on duty was an older man, maybe my age, with tired eyes that had seen too much. When Richard showed him the video, his expression changed. I saw him clench his jaw when Mark snatched the envelope from my hands. I saw him shake his head when he heard my son's words. "You have Social Security, you'll manage." "Ma'am," he said to me, after watching the full video, "I'm very sorry you're going through this. No one deserves to be treated like this, especially by their own family." He signed the documents Richard had prepared. "I'm going to process this complaint immediately, and I'm going to assign an officer to accompany you to the real estate office, just as a precaution." I hadn't expected that. "Is that necessary?" I asked, feeling a pang of fear for the first time. Not fear of Mark exactly, but fear of what this meant, of how far we had come. "Mrs. Lilia," the officer leaned forward, "your son committed a violent act against you. We have video evidence. We don't know how he will react when he realizes his plan has been blocked. It's better to be safe." He looked at Richard. "You did the right thing by coming here first." At 9 o'clock, we had the asset protection order. The on-call judge, a woman in her 50s with a stern expression, signed it after reviewing the video and the documents. Ma'am, she said to me before we left, I've seen many cases of financial elder abuse. Too many. I'm glad you had the courage to stand up for yourself. Many don't, out of shame or fear of losing their family. She paused. But let me tell you something. A family that abuses you has already lost you. What you're doing now is reclaiming your dignity. Her words stayed with me as we drove to the real estate office. Richard drove. Rachel sat next to me in the back seat, holding my hand. The police officer, a young man named Adrian, followed us in his patrol car. It was almost comical, this little convoy heading off to stop a condo sale. But I didn't feel like laughing. We arrived at 9:45. The real estate office was sleek, with large glass windows and decorative plants. I could see through the windows several desks, some agents talking on the phone, a young couple looking at property photos. Everything so normal, so ordinary. They had no idea of the drama that was about to unfold. Richard went in first and spoke to the receptionist. He discreetly showed her his lawyer's identification and some documents. I saw the woman's eyes widen, how she called someone on the intercom. A man in a suit appeared quickly, the manager apparently. There was a hushed conversation, more document reviewing. And then the manager looked out to where I was waiting outside with Rachel and Officer Adrian. They ushered us into a private office in the back. The manager, a man named Victor with a receding hairline and a worried expression, offered us seats. "Ma'am," he said to me, "I understand there is a legal issue with the funds that Mr. Mark plans to use for the purchase of the condo on Central Avenue." "That's correct," Richard answered before I could speak. "Those funds were obtained through robbery. There is an active police report and a court order blocking any transaction. If this sale proceeds, the real estate agency could be considered an accomplice to money laundering." Victor turned pale. Clearly, this was something he had never experienced in his career of selling condos. "I understand. Of course, we will not proceed with the sale. In fact, when Mr. Mark arrives, we will inform him that there is a problem with the financing and that the transaction cannot be completed." He checked his watch. He should be here in about 10 minutes. Those were the longest 10 minutes of my life. I sat in that overly air-conditioned office, watching the clock on the wall tick by, second by second. Rachel squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt. Richard reviewed his documents over and over, though I know he knew them by heart. Officer Adrian stood by the door, serious and alert, and then I saw him. Through the glass of the office, I saw Mark walk into the real estate office. Esther was at his side, wearing a pink dress and high heels. They were both smiling. Mark was carrying a briefcase, probably with the check inside. They looked so certain, so confident, so convinced they had won. The receptionist said something to them and directed them toward Victor, who had stepped out to greet them. I saw the exact moment Mark noticed the police car parked outside. I saw his smile falter. I saw Esther whisper something in his ear. But it was too late to run. Victor led them to his office, the one next to where we were waiting. The walls weren't completely thick. I could hear muffled voices. I heard Victor say something about a problem with the financing. I heard Mark respond in a confused voice. "What problem?" "I have the money right here." "Cash." "A check," Victor corrected. "And that is precisely the problem, sir. That check is linked to an active police investigation. I cannot accept it." There was a silence, and then I heard Mark's voice, louder now, agitated. "What are you talking about? What investigation? That's the money from my mother's house sale. She agreed to give it to me. It's legitimate." Richard stood up. "It's time," he said softly. I nodded, took a deep breath, and stood. Officer Adrian opened our office door, and we crossed the short hallway to the office where Mark was. Richard knocked once and entered without waiting for a reply. Rachel and I followed him. Adrian stayed in the doorway, his presence a silent reminder that this was now a legal matter. You should have seen Mark's face when he saw me walk in. First, confusion, then, understanding, and finally, panic. "Mom," he said, his voice rising an octave. "What are you doing here? What is all this?" Esther was frozen in her chair, staring at me as if she had seen a ghost. "I'm taking back what's mine," I said, and my voice sounded stronger than I expected. "Safer." I'm here to tell you that what you did on Friday was a crime. Robbery. With force. And I am not going to let you use my money, the money I earned with years of sacrifice, to buy anything. Mark stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. A crime? I'm your son. We were splitting the house money. It wasn't robbery. It was a family disagreement. He looked at Victor, at Richard, at the officer, searching for support. She's confused. She's elderly. Sometimes she gets confused. I'm not confused, I said coldly. And I have a video that shows exactly what you did. It shows you snatching the envelope from my hands. It shows you shoving your sister. It shows every word you said. I stepped closer to him, looking him directly in the eyes. You said I'd manage. That I had Social Security. That you needed that money more than I did. Remember? I saw the moment he realized he had been recorded. I saw the panic turn into real fear. I didn't. Mom, I can explain. I was upset. Esther and I were under a lot of pressure. I wasn't thinking clearly. You weren't thinking clearly. I repeated his words slowly, letting the silence make them even more absurd. Mark, you had all of Friday night, all of Saturday, all of Sunday to think clearly. You had 72 hours to call me, to apologize, to return that money. You didn't. Instead, you scheduled this appointment to buy a condo with stolen money. Esther finally found her voice. This is ridiculous. It's a family misunderstanding. You can't treat us like criminals. She turned to Victor with that charming smile that no longer fooled anyone. Sir, clearly this is a complicated family situation. There's no need to involve lawyers or police. We can resolve this among ourselves. Richard stepped forward. Mrs. Esther, your husband committed robbery against a senior citizen. There is video evidence. There is a formal police complaint. And there is a court order blocking those funds. This stopped being a family matter the moment your husband decided to use force to take what didn't belong to him. Mark was looking at me now with something that looked like desperation. Mom, please, don't do this. I'm your son. Are you really going to destroy my life over money? After everything we've been through together? His voice broke. I helped you. I took care of you when Dad died. I worked to help you with bills. Have you forgotten that? I felt something twist in my chest. It was the same old manipulation. The attempt to make me feel guilty. But this time, it wouldn't work. You were 19 years old when your father died, Mark. I was 45. I was the one who worked double shifts. I was the one who sold her jewelry. I was the one who skipped meals so you could eat. Don't rewrite history to make yourself the hero when you were the one who failed me. Mr. Mark, Officer Adrian intervened from the doorway. Right now, you have two options. You can either return the check to your mother immediately and she can decide whether to proceed with criminal charges or not. Or, I can arrest you right now for aggravated robbery, and you can wait in a cell while your case is processed. The color drained from Mark's face. Arrest me? You can't. I'm not a criminal. I'm an engineer. I work for a respectable company. Do you know what an arrest would do to my career? He looked to Esther for support, but his wife had moved away from him, as if his proximity alone might contaminate her. You should have thought of that before, Rachel said, speaking for the first time since we entered the office. Her voice was trembling with contained anger. You should have thought about the consequences when you shoved Mom, when you stole everything she had, when you decided your ambition was more important than her well-being. Esther stood up abruptly. I didn't know he was going to do that. I didn't know he would take the money by force. Mark, tell them I didn't know. Her voice rose, hysterical. I just told him we needed a condo. I didn't tell him to rob his mother. I am not going to prison for this. And there she was, the real Esther. Not the charming daughter-in-law with the perfect smiles, but the woman who would save her own skin without a second thought. Mark looked at her with an expression of betrayal so profound, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Esther, Mark said, his voice barely a whisper. What are you doing? What I should have done from the beginning, she replied, grabbing her purse. Getting out of this mess. I am not sacrificing my future for your stupid decisions. She looked at Victor. I didn't know anything about this. I thought the money was legitimate. I thought his mother had agreed to give it to him. And without waiting for a reply, she walked out of the office, moving as fast as her high heels would allow. The silence that followed was absolute. Mark just stood there, staring at the door where his wife had disappeared, the briefcase still in his hand. I watched him process what had just happened. How he realized he had lost everything in a matter of minutes. The condo, his wife, his dignity. "The check, Mark," I said softly. "Give me back the check." His hands trembled as he opened the briefcase. He took out the envelope, the same one he had snatched from my hands 3 days ago. He looked at it for a long moment, as if it were the last time he would ever see that much money. And maybe it was. Then he extended it to me without a word. I took it and held it against my chest. I felt the weight of the paper, so light physically but so heavy with meaning. This envelope represented my future, my security, my dignity, and I had almost lost it by blindly trusting my own son. "Now," Richard said, "we need to discuss the criminal charges. Mrs. Lilia, the decision is yours. You can proceed with the case, which means Mark will face trial and possible prison time. Or you can drop the charges with certain conditions." I looked at my son. I really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years. I saw the man he had become. Selfish, manipulative, willing to hurt his own mother for money. But I also saw the boy he had been. The boy who cried in my arms when he had nightmares. The teenager who held me at his father's funeral. The person who had existed before greed consumed him. "I'm not going to press charges," I said finally. Rachel looked at me, surprised. But I continued. "But I have conditions. First, you are going to sign a legal document acknowledging what you did and waiving any claim to my money, now or in the future. Second, you are going to therapy. Not for me, but for you, because you clearly need help. Third, I don't want to see you or speak to you for at least 1 year. Mom," Mark started, and there were tears in his eyes now. "I'm not finished," I interrupted. "After that year, if you have truly worked on yourself, if you have truly changed, we can try to rebuild some kind of relationship, but it will never be what it was. That trust is broken, and I don't know if it can be repaired. And fourth condition, if you ever try anything like this again, with me or with your sister, I will not hesitate to process the full charges. Understood?" Mark nodded, tears now streaming freely down his face. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I didn't want. I don't know what happened to me. Esther and I. The pressure. It's no excuse, I know. But I'm sorry." "I know," I said, and I was surprised to realize it was true. He was sorry. Sorry he got caught. Sorry for the consequences. But I wasn't sure if he was truly sorry for hurting me, and that uncertainty was enough to keep my decision firm. Richard pulled documents from his briefcase. "Then I need you to sign here, here, and here. This is a legally binding agreement. If you break it, the criminal charges will be reactivated automatically." Mark signed with a trembling hand, not even reading what he was signing. He was completely defeated. When he finished, Officer Adrian spoke. "Mr. Mark, technically I could still arrest you since you did commit a crime, but I will respect your mother's decision. However, I want you to know that this will be on record. If there is ever another incident, this prior event will be taken into consideration." Mark just nodded. He had no more words, no more excuses. He stood up slowly, like a man much older than his 42 years, and walked to the door. He paused for a moment, looking back at me one last time. "Mom, but the words wouldn't come. He shook his head and left. I stared at the door where Mark had disappeared. Part of me wanted to run after him, to hug him, to tell him everything would be okay, just as I had 1,000 times when he was a child. But he wasn't a child anymore, and I was no longer the mother who solved all his problems, no matter the cost. That woman had died on Friday when he snatched that envelope from my hands. Rachel touched my shoulder gently. "Mom, are you okay?" Her voice was full of concern. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was true. I didn't know how I was supposed to feel after confronting my own son, after watching him fall apart, after choosing my dignity over the maternal instinct that screamed at me to forgive him for everything. "You did the right thing," Richard said, putting the signed documents into his briefcase. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did. You gave him a chance to change, to grow. Many mothers in your situation would have just let him get away with it, perpetuating the cycle. You stopped it." Victor, the real estate manager, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mrs. Lilia, I'm very sorry you had to go through this in my office. If there's anything I can do," his voice trailed off, clearly unsure what else to say in such a bizarre situation. "Thank you," I said simply. "And thank you for your cooperation. I know this isn't something you experience every day." I tried to manage a smile, but my face felt stiff. Officer Adrian walked us outside, making sure Mark was already gone. His patrol car was still parked out front, a silent reminder of how close this had all come to ending much worse. "Mrs. Lilia," he said before leaving, "I've worked in domestic abuse cases for years. Elders robbed by their own children. Abused, abandoned. Most are too afraid or too ashamed to do anything about it. You were brave today. Remember that when you doubt your decision," he gave me his card, "if you need anything, if he tries to contact you before the year is up, call me immediately." When we were left alone in the parking lot, just Rachel, Richard, and me, I felt my legs start to buckle. All the adrenaline that had kept me standing for the last few hours evaporated all at once. Richard steadied me with an arm. "Let's sit down for a moment before we go," he suggested, guiding me to a nearby bench. I sat down and finally, the tears came. They weren't dramatic tears or loud sobs. They were silent tears that slid down my cheeks as I stared at the envelope in my hands. Rachel sat next to me and held me, saying nothing. Sometimes words aren't necessary. Sometimes you just need someone to hold you while you break a little. "I lost my son," I whispered after a while. "I got my money back, but I lost my son." "You didn't lose him, Mom," Rachel said softly. "He lost himself. You just refused to get lost along with him." She gently brushed the hair from my face. "And maybe, just maybe, this is what he needed to find himself again. I don't know. But what I do know is that you didn't deserve what he did, and you had every right to defend yourself." Richard waited patiently while I processed everything. When I finally calmed down, he pulled out more documents. "Lilia, we need to go to the bank now and deposit that check. We also need to set up some protections for your account, to make sure no one else can access it." He paused. "And frankly, you need to think about your future, where you're going to live now, how you're going to use this money wisely." He was right, of course. In the midst of all the drama, I had forgotten that I was homeless. I had sold my house, and now had $280,000, but nowhere to sleep past this week, when I had to hand over the keys to the new owner. "You can stay with me," Rachel offered immediately. "I have room. It's not much, but it's enough while you decide what to do." "No," I said, surprising myself. "Thank you, my love, but no. I've depended on my children too much. I've expected too much from them. It's time for me to take care of myself, completely." I looked at the envelope in my hands. "I'm going to find a small apartment, something comfortable and manageable, something that is just mine, that no one can take away from me." Richard smiled. "That's my client talking. Tomorrow we can start looking at options, and I'm going to help you set up a trust to protect your assets. Nothing complicated, just making sure that if anything happens to you, your money goes where you want it to, and it can't be disputed." We went to the bank straight from the real estate office. The manager, a woman named Miriam, who knew me from years of being a customer, was shocked to see us arrive with Richard and the whole legal story. We explained the situation, and she worked efficiently to deposit the check, temporarily freeze my account for added security, and set up new passwords and protocols that only I knew. "Mrs. Lilia," she said as she processed everything, "I'm so sorry you went through this. I see similar cases far too often. Children who think their elderly parents' money automatically belongs to them." She shook her head. "I'm glad you took action. Many don't until it's too late." That night, at Rachel's apartment where she insisted I stay for at least a few days, I sat on the sofa with a cup of tea and thought about everything that had happened. 4 days ago, I had been sitting at my dining room table, dividing my house money with my children. 4 days ago, I still believed that Mark, despite his flaws, would never truly hurt me. 4 days ago, I was a different person. My phone rang around midnight. It was an unknown number. I ignored it. It rang again 5 minutes later, and again 10 minutes after that. Finally, I checked the voicemail. It was Esther, mother-in-law. Her voice sounded different now, without the artificial sweet tone. It sounded tired, real. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I get it, but I need you to know something. I was not a good person. I pressured Mark constantly for material things. I made him feel like he wasn't enough if he couldn't give me everything I wanted. I manipulated the situation with the condo, but I never, ever thought he would go that far. I never thought he would physically hurt you. There was a pause. I left Mark tonight. I filed for divorce. Not because of what he did to you today, but because I finally saw who he had become because of me, and who I had become. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth. I deleted the message. I didn't have the energy to process Esther's apology or to feel satisfaction that she had left Mark. All I felt was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. Rachel came in with more tea. "You can't sleep?" she asked, sitting next to me. I shook my head. "Mom, I know it hurts now. I know you feel like you lost Mark, but I want you to know something." She took my hand. "I'm proud of you. So proud. You taught me something today that I will never forget. You taught me that self-love isn't selfishness, that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, that defending yourself doesn't make you a bad person. I don't feel like a good person," I admitted. "I feel like a mother who failed." "You didn't fail," Rachel said firmly. "Mark made his own choices. You made yours, and yours were the right ones." She hugged me. "Now get some rest. Tomorrow, we start looking for your new home, a place where you can be happy, without fear." I fell asleep that night on my daughter's sofa, exhausted but strangely at peace. I had been through a storm, and I had survived. I had lost something precious, but I had gained something even more precious, my dignity. The following days passed in a strange mix of normalcy and surrealism. In the mornings, Rachel would go to her office, and I would stay in her apartment, drinking coffee and staring out the window without really seeing anything. In the afternoons, Richard would take me to see apartments. Small, manageable ones, some with park views, others near shopping centers, all functional. None of them felt like home yet. "Give it time," Richard would tell me every time I rejected an option. "You just lost your home of 17 years and confronted your son. Don't expect to feel thrilled about moving right away." He was right, as usual. But that didn't make the process any easier. On Wednesday, we found something different. A condo on the 3rd floor of a building about 20 minutes from where Rachel lived. 2 bedrooms. A small balcony with plants left by the previous owner, and most importantly, large windows that let in the afternoon sunday. When I walked in and saw the golden light filling the empty living room, I felt something. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was something. A spark of possibility. "This one," I said, surprising Richard and the realtor. "This is the one." The price was reasonable, $75,000. It would leave me with plenty of money for furniture, emergencies, and to continue living comfortably with my Social Security. Richard reviewed all the legal documents, made sure there were no hidden problems, and a week later, I signed the papers. For the second time in my life, I was a homeowner. But this time was different. This time, it was just for me. Rachel helped me move. I didn't have much to move. Most of my belongings had been sold with the house. I bought new furniture, simple but comfortable. A bed that wouldn't hurt my back, a sofa where I could read, a small table for 2, not for large families. Everything was new. Everything was a fresh start. The first night in my new apartment, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea and watched the city light up as the sun went down. I could hear the distant traffic, children playing in the nearby park, life happening all around me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. My phone had been silent since the confrontation at the real estate office. Mark hadn't tried to contact me, respecting at least that part of our agreement. Esther had called one more time, but I didn't answer. Some bridges are better left burned. But then, 3 weeks after I moved in, I received something unexpected. It was a letter, handwritten, in Mark's script that I would recognize anywhere. I held it in my hands for several minutes before opening it, debating if I wanted to read whatever it had to say. Finally, curiosity won. "Mom," it began, "I know we agreed to no contact for a year, but I need to write this even if you don't read it until after. I started therapy, like I promised. At first, I went because it was part of the agreement, but then I started going because I realized how much I needed it. My therapist has helped me see things about myself I didn't want to see. How Esther manipulated me, yes, but also how I let myself be manipulated because it was easier than facing my own demons. How I always felt like I was never enough, that I always needed more to prove my worth. How I turned your sacrifice into a burden, into something you owed me, instead of seeing it as the act of love it was." The letter went on for several pages. Mark talked about his divorce from Esther, which had been finalized quickly once she realized he didn't have the money she expected. He talked about losing friends who were only interested in his apparent success. He talked about facing who he really was, without the masks he had built. "I'm not writing this for you to forgive me," it said near the end. "I'm writing because I need you to know that what you did confronting me, stopping me, was the best thing anyone has ever done for me. It hurt, it still hurts, but it was necessary. You saved me from becoming someone completely lost. I don't know if we'll ever be able to rebuild our relationship, but I want you to know that I'm working on myself, not for you, but for me, because I finally understand that I need to be right with myself before I can have healthy relationships with anyone else. I love you, Mom. I've always loved you. I just lost sight of what that really means." I finished the letter with tears streaming down my face. They weren't tears of immediate forgiveness or happy reconciliation. They were tears of acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that my son was finally seeing the truth. I didn't know if it was permanent. I didn't know if he would really change, but it was a start. I put the letter in a drawer. I wouldn't answer it. Not yet. The agreement was a year of silence, and I would respect it. But knowing he was working on himself, that my decision had had the effect I'd hoped for, lifted a weight I had been carrying. The months passed. I settled into a quiet routine. In the mornings I walked in the park. In the afternoons, I read or tended to the plants on my balcony. Rachel came over for dinner twice a week. Richard visited occasionally to check on my finances and make sure everything was in order. I made friends in the building, other women my age with their own stories of survival. One of them, Miriam from the 5th floor, became my confidant. I told her the whole story one afternoon over coffee on my balcony. She listened without interrupting, nodding at the appropriate times. When I finished, she told me something I'll never forget. "Lilia, do you know the difference between women who survive and women who thrive?" I shook my head. "The ones who survive endure. The ones who thrive set boundaries. You thrived." She took my hand. "And believe me, your story will inspire others. It's already inspired me." Miriam was right. When I shared my story with other women in the building, many confessed similar situations. Children pressuring them for money, relatives abusing their generosity, all of them feeling guilty for even considering standing up for themselves. I told them what I had learned. That love doesn't mean letting yourself be trampled. That being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity. That it's okay, more than okay, to protect yourself. 6 months after I moved in, I finally felt at home. The apartment was no longer just an empty space with new furniture. It was my sanctuary. I woke up every morning without anxiety. I went to sleep every night without fear. My money was safe in the bank, growing slowly with conservative investments Richard had suggested. My health was stable. My heart, though still bruised, was healing. Rachel surprised me one Saturday with news. "Mom, I met someone," she said with a shy smile. "His name is Daniel. He's an accountant too. And I want you to meet him." The excitement in her voice filled me with joy. My daughter, who had said she would never get married, who had seen too much pain, was allowing herself to be happy. "I'd love to meet him," I said, hugging her. And it was true. After all the darkness, seeing my daughter shine was like seeing the sun after an endless storm. That night, alone on my balcony under the stars, I thought about the year that had passed. about how everything had changed in an instant, about how I had lost a son but found myself, about how the money I almost lost wasn't really about the money at all. It was about respect, about self-worth, about finally, after 67 years, putting my own needs on the same level as everyone else's. The year of silence agreed upon with Mark was nearing its end. It was strange how time could feel simultaneously eternal and fleeting. Some days, I missed my son with a physical ache in my chest. Other days, I felt relieved not to have to deal with his drama. But mostly, I felt a kind of calm I had never experienced before. The calm of living without walking on eggshells, without worrying about the next demand or manipulation. Richard had been helping me organize my finances more sophisticatedly. Lilia, with your money invested correctly and your social security, you could live comfortably until you're 95 and still leave a decent inheritance, he explained one afternoon in his office. But I want you to think about something. What do you want to do with your life now? Not just survive, but live. The question took me by surprise. For so long, my life had been about working, sacrificing, taking care of others. The idea of living for the simple pleasure of it was almost foreign. I don't know, I admitted. I've never had the luxury of thinking about it. Well, think about it now, Richard said with a smile. You're 68 years old, in good health, financially secure. The world is open to you in ways it wasn't before. What would you like to do? Travel? Study something new? Take up a hobby? The conversation echoed in my mind for days. One night, looking at old photos, I found one of me at 20 years old. I was on a beach with friends, smiling without a care in the world. Before I met Robert, before the kids, before all the responsibilities, I barely remembered that girl. I wondered what she would have dreamed for her future, what she would have wanted to do if she'd had the freedom to choose. I started making a list. Small things at first. Learn to paint, take an Italian cooking class, go to the beach from my photos, then bigger things. Maybe travel to Spain, the country of my grandparents I never knew. Visit museums. Read all the books I never had time to read. The list grew every day, and with it, something I had forgotten I could feel. Excitement. Miriam from the 5th floor became my partner in adventure. Together, we took a watercolor painting class at a community center. I was terrible, my flowers looked like formless blobs, but we laughed so hard it didn't matter. We went to free concerts in the park. We tried new restaurants. Small things that made me feel alive in ways I hadn't in decades. You know what the best part of getting older is? Miriam asked me one day as we painted. We don't have to impress anyone anymore. We can be ridiculous if we want. We can fail without it mattering. We're free in a way we never were when we were young. She was right. There was an incredible freedom in not having to be perfect. Rachel introduced me to Daniel at my apartment for dinner. He was a gentleman of 45, with kind eyes and an easy laugh. Seeing them together, the way he looked at her with genuine respect, the way she relaxed at his side, filled me with a joy I didn't expect. My daughter had found something good, something healthy, something I had wanted for her all her life. Your mother is amazing, Daniel told me, while Rachel was getting dessert. The way she talks about you, what you faced, how you stood up for yourself. You're her hero. His words made me blush. I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt like a woman who had finally said, enough. 2 weeks before the year was up, I received another letter from Mark. This one was shorter than the first. Mom, the year is almost over. I don't expect you to want to see me. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know that I have changed. Not perfectly. I still have bad days. But I'm different from the man who hurt you. If you decide you want to talk when the year is up, I'll be waiting. If you decide you don't, I will understand and respect your decision. I just want you to be happy. I love you. I talked to Rachel about the letter. What do you think I should do? I asked her. She thought carefully before answering. Mom, only you can decide that. But I'll tell you what I see. Mark has kept his word. He hasn't harassed you. He has respected the boundaries. He has gone to therapy. I can't tell you if he's genuinely changed because I haven't spoken to him, but I can tell you that you deserve to protect your peace. If seeing him threatens that peace, don't do it. And if you decide to give him a chance, do it with clear boundaries and no expectations. She took my hand. But most of all, remember that you don't owe him anything. You already gave him a lifetime of love and sacrifice. Whatever you decide now is purely your choice. The day that marked exactly 1 year since the confrontation at the real estate office, I woke up early. I had my coffee on the balcony, watching the city wake up. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the pain, the loss, but also the growth, the peace, the rediscovery of myself. I picked up my phone and wrote a text to Mark. We can meet. Coffee. Public place. Next week. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a full reconciliation. It was simply an opening, a possibility, a willingness to listen, albeit cautiously. His reply came minutes later. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for giving me this chance. I promise I won't waste it. I read the message several times, looking for signs of manipulation, of falseness, but I only found what seemed to be genuine gratitude. Time would tell if it was real. I told Richard about my decision. He nodded approvingly. That's wise. I'd recommend that I be present at that first meeting just as an observer. Sometimes having a neutral third party helps keep the conversation productive and prevents old patterns from resurfacing. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I wondered what Mark would look like, if he had really changed or if he had just learned to act better. I wondered if I would be able to maintain my boundaries or if maternal instinct would make me give in too quickly. I wondered if I was making a mistake. Miriam came over for tea that night, sensing my restlessness. You're scared? She asked directly. I nodded. That's good. Fear means you're being careful, that you're not letting blind love cloud your judgment. She put her cup on the table. Lilia, you've spent a year building a beautiful life. You've healed. You've grown. Don't let anyone, not even your son, destroy that. You can love him and protect yourself at the same time. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. She was right, as always. I could love Mark and still hold firm boundaries. I could give him a chance without giving him everything. I could listen without forgetting. Forgiveness, if it came, would be a long process, not something that would happen over one coffee. I fell asleep that night with a mix of nervousness and determination. Tomorrow, I would see my son for the first time in a year. I would see if the man who hurt me had found the man I raised. I would see if there was hope for us, or if some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. But no matter what happened, I knew one thing for sure. I would be fine, with or without Mark in my life. Because finally, after 68 years, I had learned that my value didn't depend on being the perfect, endlessly sacrificing mother. My value was in being a whole woman, with valid needs and healthy boundaries, and that nothing and no one could ever take away from me. The coffee shop I chose was in a busy mall, with big windows and spaced-out tables. Nothing intimate, nothing private. A place where emotions would have to be kept in check by the simple presence of strangers. Richard arrived first and sat at a nearby table, not with us, but visible. His presence gave me security. Mark arrived exactly on time. I saw him walk in and search for me, and when our eyes met, I felt a lump in my throat. He looked different, thinner, with some gray hairs I didn't remember. He wore simple clothes, not the expensive brands Esther always insisted he buy. But the most noticeable thing was his expression. The arrogance I had watched grow in him for years was gone. There was something softer, more humble. He approached slowly, as if afraid to startle me. "Mom," he said when he reached my table, and his voice broke a little. He didn't try to hug me. He sat across from me, keeping a respectful distance. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for giving me this chance. I'm not here to give you anything," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "I'm here to listen, to see if you've really changed, or if this is just another performance." My words were harsh, but necessary. I couldn't afford to be soft yet. Mark nodded, accepting my words without defensiveness. "I understand. And you have every right to doubt me. I've spent this past year thinking about that day, about your empty hands when I took that envelope, about the look on your face." His eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I destroyed something precious that day. I didn't just physically hurt you. I destroyed your trust in me, and I don't know if I can ever repair it." You can't, I said simply. That trust is gone. But what you can do is build something new. Something different. If there's even anything to build. I sipped my coffee, giving myself time to gather my thoughts. Tell me what's really changed. Don't give me pretty words. Give me facts. Mark took a deep breath. I left my job at the construction firm. It was a toxic environment where everything was about appearances and status. I work as an independent consultant now. I make less, but I'm happier. I sold my luxury car and bought a reliable used one. I moved into a small apartment I can easily afford. I've stopped trying to impress people I don't even care about. He paused. And I'm still in therapy. Twice a week. I've worked on understanding where my constant need for more came from, my feeling that I was never enough. And, I prompted. Where did it come from? From me, he admitted. From my own insecurity. From constantly comparing my life to others. From measuring my worth in material things because I didn't know how to measure it any other way. He looked at me directly. And also from resentment. Resentment I didn't even know I had. Resentment because we grew up poor. Because Dad died and I had to work. Because I felt like you had stolen my youth, when in reality you gave me mine by sacrificing yours. His words hit me. I had never considered that Mark might feel resentment. I had always thought it was just ingratitude. But resentment was different, more complex, deeper. Go on, I said. My therapist helped me see that I turned your sacrifice into a debt I could never repay, and that made me feel guilty. And the guilt turned into anger, and I directed that anger at you, turning your needs into obstacles to my happiness. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. When Esther came along and validated that anger, when she told me I deserved more, that you had enough, it was easy to believe her because it was more comfortable than facing my own toxicity. And Esther? I asked. Have you spoken to her? No. The divorce was finalized months ago. She's already remarried, to someone who apparently does have the money she was looking for. There was no bitterness in his voice, just acceptance. I hope she's happy. Seriously. She had her own problems, her own insecurities. I don't blame her for everything. I made the decisions. I snatched that envelope from your hands. That was my choice. We sat in silence for a moment. The coffee shop buzzed with life around us. Families laughing, couples talking, normal life happening while we tried to navigate this impossible moment between mother and son. What do you want from me, Mark? I asked, finally. What do you expect from this conversation? Nothing, he replied, and for the first time, I believed he meant it. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect us to go back to what we were, because I know that's impossible. I just want you to know that I'm sorry, that I have changed, and that if someday, at some point, you decide you want me in your life in some small way, I'll be here. But if you decide you don't, I will respect that too. Your peace is more important than my desire for redemption. I looked at my son. I really looked at him. I saw the 43-year-old man in front of me, his pain evident, his regret genuine. But I also saw the scars he had left on me, the distrust that would never fully fade, the fear of being hurt again. I don't know if I can trust you again, I told him honestly. I don't know if I want to try. I understand, Mark said. And that's okay, it really is. But, I continued, surprising myself, I'm willing to try something small, very small, maybe coffee once a month, just to talk. No expectations, no promises, and if at any point I feel you're slipping back into old patterns, I'm walking away, and there won't be a second chance. Do you understand? Yes, Mark said, and a small, sad smile touched his face. Thank you, Mom. I won't waste it. I hope not, I replied. Because, Mark, I need you to understand something fundamental. I am okay now. I have my condo, my friends, my routine. I have peace, and I will not sacrifice that peace for anyone, not even you. The son I raised will always be part of my heart, but the man who hurt me has no place in my life. Only the man in front of me now, the one working to be better, has a chance. We stayed for another hour, talking about superficial things. His new job, my painting classes, Rachel and Daniel. We avoided the deep topics, the pain still too raw to explore fully. When we said goodbye, Mark extended his hand. Not for a hug, just a handshake. I took it briefly, a small gesture that meant everything and nothing at the same time. Richard walked me home. "You did well," he told me. "You held your boundaries. You were clear, but not cruel. And you gave him what he needed, real consequences, but also a small measure of hope." He smiled. "I'm proud of you, Lilia." That night, on my balcony, I reflected on the year that had passed, on the betrayal that broke me, but also freed me, on the pain that taught me to value myself, on the loss that allowed me to find myself. Mark thought he could snatch my dignity along with my money. He was wrong. Because what he really did was show me that I was stronger than I ever believed, that I deserved respect. That self-love wasn't selfishness, but survival. He lost a lot that day. He lost his marriage, his image, his sense of superiority. But I gained something invaluable. I gained my freedom. I gained my peace. I gained myself. Now, sitting in my small condo overlooking the city, with my cup of tea and my future open before me, I finally understood something fundamental. I didn't need to be the perfect, endlessly sacrificing mother. I just needed to be Lilia, a 68-year-old woman who had worked her whole life, who had loved deeply, who had been betrayed terribly, and who had chosen her own dignity above all else. And that was more than enough.